on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Well, good morning, everybody, and happy Friday to one and all. It is 7:07 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We are making sense of the news. This is O'Connor and Company. I'm Andrew Langer, in for Larry O'Connor today, sitting with Patrice Onwuka. Hello, Patrice. Happy...
Hi. Friday.
Friday. Happy Friday to you as well. I live for those moments where I can sit down and hear Patrice say those magic words of a happy Friday, and it's a holiday weekend. We'll get into that later on because I do want to find out what your plans are for the weekend, Patrice. Listen, we got Nick Minock from WJLA joining us later on in this hour, talking about a bunch of local stories, including what's happening with the Fairfax County Sheriff and ICE. Next hour, we got Joe Concha, because we're going to talk about this. We're going to continue to talk about the Harris Waltz interview last evening. Plus, Mike Van Meter, who's running against Jerry Connolly for Congress. Arlington Gate continues. The Army got involved yesterday, so we're going to talk to Mike Van Meter about that. But joining us right now, his name is James Rosen. He's the White House correspondent for Newsmax. So glad he can join us. Hey, James, so do we still have a president of the United States? Are we still doing that thing? Because I haven't seen hide nor hair of Joe Biden in quite a while.
Good morning to you both. It's great to be with you both. Yes, we are assured that we still have a president of the United States insofar as we keep getting pool reports. But we don't see very much of Joe Biden these days. He's been on vacation since right after he delivered his DNC address on August 19, first in California, and more recently, I think, since the 25th at his beach home in Rehoboth, Delaware. But, you know, I was never a fan, Andrew and Patrice, of that vein or skein of journalism that shames presidents for playing golf or going on vacation. It's good that presidents of the United States, like all other people, should get away from it all for a while, even if they really can't. There's every expectation that whoever was golfing, whether it was George W. Bush or Barack Obama or Donald Trump, probably was conferring with aides over decision-making issues on the golf cart between shots. The problem for Joe Biden, of course, is that the whole question of extended time off carries greater weight because of the very nature of the questions that forced him from the 2024 contest about his mental and physical condition. And all of this led this reporter to pose to retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, the spokesman for the White House National Security
James,
Council.
we do have that clip. We can play it if you don't mind. Cut 19.
Sure.
The question I am hearing from members of the general public, and which I put to you here, Admiral, is who is running the country?
President Joe Biden.
Is he a ceremonial figure in some sense at this point?
James, now you know better than that. I mean, my goodness, he talked to Prime Minister Modi today. He had calls with leaders in the region and in Europe. President Zelensky last week. He monitored in real time what was going on over the weekend. I mean, come on.
So, James, were you surprised by all these calls and meetings the president has had? I mean, are you even getting any readouts from these calls or anything like that?
Yes, readouts are provided, and this administration complies with the historical tradition that they tell us very little. But we are led to understand that the major agenda item taking up President Biden's time these days remains the elusive quest for a ceasefire for hostages deal in the Middle East. But again, the nature of the problems surrounding President Biden and the public concerns that ultimately forced him to withdraw from the contest are of a specific nature. And once that's the problem, which has to do with cognition and decline, then it calls into question the entire apparatus of governing and how it was accomplished. And we're only going to learn more about that, I suspect, over time.
It's interesting because last night in this interview, Kamala Harris talked about Joe Biden's legacy and what it's going to mean on balance. I want to get your reaction to the interview overall and Kamala's characterization there, but I also want to get your reaction to this idea. CNN, there was roughly 40 minutes of interview. They played 18. They're not releasing a full transcript. And they went so far as on the Chyron, when the interview was being played, to claim that it was a live interview. What do you make of all that?
I don't think that any news organization is under any compulsion to air the entirety of every interview. And that would swiftly make for dull viewing or reading. That said, it's commendable that people might want to see the whole thing. I think as for the interview itself, you asked also about the Chyron. We should, for the benefit of our non-industry listeners, i.e. normal people,
yes.
A Chyron refers to the text that you'll see on your TV screen beneath someone's face, identifying them, let's say, or telling you where and when something was occurring. That's graphics that you see on screen. For the Chyron saying live, I suppose perhaps they meant that it was recorded live. I'm not sure about that. I know that it was recorded earlier in the day, and clips were released, and then they played the much larger segment of it at 9 p.m. Eastern last night. The overall effect, I think, was less than what the Harris-Walz ticket would have hoped for. This marked the first sustained unscripted questioning that Vice President Harris has fielded since claiming the top of the ticket. And I think in various places, whether it was and I think Dana Bash, my colleague Dana Bash, whom I've known forever, did a fantastic job, as she had done at the June 27 debate between Mr. Trump and Biden. I think Dana Bash pressed her admirably in various questions that people have wanted to know the answer to. Do you still support the banning of fracking? Do you regret anything that you said to the American people about the condition of President Biden? And so on. And in each of these answers, the vice president seemed to me, to my eyes, to be defensive, brittle, struggling to pivot. And then at times, when she made her pivots, it was extraordinary, the vice president's use of language. So on the fracking issue, in 2019, she said, "There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking." Asked about that by Dana Bash last night, the vice president pointed to her pivot in 2020, where she said she no longer held that view. And then she said, "That has been my view. It's 2024. I did not ban fracking as vice president. I will not as president. I have kept my word." And here, the former prosecutor presented with a question about shifting her public policies, her stands on public policies, ends by telling us that she has in fact kept her word. Now that's a neat rhetorical trick to try and pull off. I'm not sure it landed well last night.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it was, and there were moments there where Dana Bash was, I think, taken aback by the answers there. Ed Henry, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. Boy, oh boy. James Rosen, how do folks find out more about the good work you're doing at Newsmax?
So watching Newsmax would be the most direct route. We also have our streaming service where I appear frequently, N2. And then you can always follow me on Twitter at James Rosen TV.
That's James Rosen TV. Go check him out on
Thank you
Twitter.
So much, James.
James, thank you so very much for joining us
Thank you both.
today.
It's great to be with you.
Take care. Yeah.
WMAL. Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
I have never heard that.
Yeah, it's been a bit. You know, there are McDonald's ads I have known. I haven't had McDonald's in far too long. Anyway. So there is this tendency amongst presidential candidates to try to portray themselves as the everyman or the everywoman. As a way of trying to connect with the voters. I get that. Tim Walz trying to portray Kamala Harris's emotional support vice president as some kind of regular guy, everyman thing. Kamala Harris, who is was a prosecutor. She's a lawyer. She went to law school. The child of two very radical professors. Her way of connecting is claiming that she was a McDonald's employee when she was in school. Yeah, I know. I was surprised at this, too. We never heard this before. Here she is talking about being do we have the clip of her talking about being a McDonald's employee? Or do we have it in seven? We have the one from talking about it in here we go. Yeah, let's play cut number 20.
my co-pilot, who has a very hard-hitting question for you. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely.
Ross?
Yes. Hello, Madam Vice President. It's me, Ross. Hi. So nice to meet you. I want to ask a question about a topic that really unites America. Fast food. Okay, so here's the deal. I heard a rumor that you worked at McDonald's. Is this true?
I did. Yes, I did.
I didn't know that about you.
When I was in school.
Me too. I worked registered, drive-through, and grill. I was known as a triple threat. Okay, just for the record.
I did fries.
Just the fries?
I did fries, and then I did the cashier.
Okay, I'm impressed. Fries are hard. Okay, so here's my question for you. If you get the motorcade to pull
just
through
the thing.
drive-
All right, we can stop that there. So she said this is April of 2024. That's on the Drew Barrymore show. But apparently not so much, Patrice. Let's listen to Jesse Waters last night talking with Andrew Kerr. We can't get this verified. Let's play cut 21.
So what'd you find? Right. Well, Kamala's story about her job at McDonald's has shifted dramatically over the past couple weeks. At first, her campaign came out and said that this was a job she worked to pay her way through college. But now they say that she worked there for one summer just to earn a little extra spending money. So, yeah, we looked into it. Did she actually work at McDonald's? Well, she didn't mention it throughout the first several decades of her political career, made no mention of it in both of her books, including her 2019 memoir, in which she devoted an entire chapter to the struggles of service industry workers. There's been several biographies published about her in the past couple of years, none of which mention her job at McDonald's. The author of one of those biographies told us that he was not aware of the claim. We obtained a job application that Kamala filled out for a law clerk position in 1987 that instructed her to list every job that she had for the past 10 years. McDonald's is not mentioned in that job application or in her resume. At that time, we reached out to McDonald's corporate several times asking, hey, can you confirm her employment? No response. We reached out to McDonald's in the Alameda area. None would say if Kamala worked at their location. We reached out to the Harris campaign asking, hey, can you specify which location in Alameda County that she worked at? And they won't answer. So it's possible that she did work at McDonald's for a few weeks in the summer of 1983. But when you put all this together, it just raises some very serious questions about what has become a foundational narrative that Democrats are relying on to connect Kamala Harris to the working class.
Listen, I don't know what to make of this. I want to know what you think about this, Patrice. We'll talk about it in a moment. We got so much more to get to.
Just the
fries? I did fries, and then I did the cashier.
Okay, I'm impressed. Fries are hard. Okay.
No, they're really not all that hard. But Patrice, I mean, here's the thing that gets me is Huffington Post going after the Washington Free Beacon for doing this sort of an investigation. Listen, we get it. Westmore fibbed on his application for a White House fellowship, claimed that he got a Bronze Star they didn't get. That is important, but also if you're embellishing your resume and saying you worked at a minimum wage, fast food job when you didn't, that's important, isn't it?
Well, of course it is, because it speaks to your values. We heard a lot of that from Kamala Harris. Oh, yes. I mean, Elizabeth Warren, she embellished her record and used her Native American background to get, special treatment at Harvard. I mean, this is what folks do, and it's good to expose it. Now, if people find out she didn't work at McDonald's, is that going to swing their vote? Probably not, but at least you know the kind of person she is.
Yeah, it gets down to this. There was a point, right, where we were talking about Tim Walz's resume and what he was saying that he had done, and everything you would turn around, and it seemed like it was lie, maybe a too strong a statement, but embellished. And that's the problem, right? We listen, we get it. We get that we have politicians who lie, and we have an expectation, but we should demand more, shouldn't we?
There's nothing wrong with demanding more. I'm actually just looking through, though, how different news outlets and fact checkers are dealing with this. And Snopes is like, here's what we know. And the best they have is research in progress. They can't even verify. So here's why this matters. They want to position Kamala Harris as the working woman against Donald Trump, the billionaire. Yet they can't deal with the fact that the DNC all they had on stages were massive multimillionaires and billionaires. So, like, right. let's stop with this class system warfare.
I want my fries. More in a moment.
Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is 7:37 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Making sense of the news. Happy Friday to one and all. We've got Joe Concha joining us in the next hour. Mike Van Meter as well. He's running against Jerry Connolly for Congress. I'm Andrew Langer here on O'Connor and Company, sitting in for Larry O'Connor, alongside Patrice Onwuka. Hello, Patrice.
Good morning. Happy Friday, Andrew.
Happy Friday. Listen, Heather, I'm going to tell you this right now. The next segment, after we talk to Nick Minock, we got to talk about the visuals, because something else was pointed out to me about this interview last night. But before we do that, I want to talk to we got to talk to Nick Minock from WJLA ABC 7. Nick, listen, welcome to the show. We got all kinds of stuff going on. This news about the Fairfax County Sheriff's policy on releasing non-citizen inmates. You broke this stuff. What's going on with this?
Right. So this week, 7 News reported that a man who entered the U.S. illegally back in 2023 near El Paso, Texas, he was arrested 3 times just this year in Fairfax County. And all 3 times, ICE says they issued a immigration detainer. But the Fairfax County Sheriff, Stacey Kincaid, did not honor those detainers. This isn't the first time that she has ignored ICE detainers. It's written in her policy that she refuses to honor ICE detainers. And ICE says this is important because if they don't honor these ICE detainers, they get released back into the community, and then ICE has to go and track them down, and that's often hard for them to do. And often there's safety implications of that. So we're talking about a man who was arrested 3 times. The first time, he was charged by the Fairfax County Police Department with felony rape and a misdemeanor child sexual assault. The second time he was arrested was for a DWI. And for the 3rd time, he was arrested for felonies, possessing child pornography, serious charges, all 3 times released to the street by the Fairfax County Sheriff. And I want to mention this too. And the first time he was arrested, how I mentioned he was charged with felony rape. The Fairfax County Commonwealth's attorney, Steve Descano, dropped that charge. So he was only convicted of the misdemeanor. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail, but the court suspended the full 6-month sentence.
Wow. Sorry, go ahead, Patrice.
Well, this is ridiculous. Nick, when I'm thinking about it, I'm reading through this article here, and it seems like a lot of the issue is with the Fairfax County Sheriff, Stacey Kincaid, who I believe won her re-election in 2023. What is she saying? Why does she not honor detainers from ICE? Why is she not turning over violent sexual predators in the county to ICE, to federal law enforcement?
Right. So Sheriff Kincaid sent us a letter. People can read it on WJLA.com. It's about 2 pages, and she gives her explanation. She views ICE detainers as merely requests, and she points to a Virginia Attorney General opinion from Mark Herring years ago that says they are mere requests. So that's what she is using to back her policy up. We'll see if Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares reverses that opinion, but she is choosing not to honor detainers. In Loudoun County, the sheriff there, Mike Chapman, chooses to work with ICE. As soon as they make an arrest of someone who's in the U.S. illegally, they notify ICE and they work with ICE and they honor detainers. So there's some jurisdictions that are choosing to work with ICE, others that are not. Fairfax County is one of them. Sheriff Kincaid says she requires a judicial warrant. But I spoke with ICE and they said what the sheriff is doing there by trying to require a judicial warrant is asking ICE to do something outside of what Congress has allowed ICE to do.
No, it's crazy. We're talking with Nick Minock. He's a reporter with WJLA ABC 7. Real quick, before we let you go, Nick, what's going on in the Virginia 7 race? Derek Anderson's raised some questions about Evgeny Vindman, as he's called him, Yevgeny Vindman's military service.
Sure. So a few things. Derek Anderson, who's the Republican candidate in Virginia's 7th Congressional District, called on his opponent, Eugene Vindman, to not only debate him, but also answer questions about what he has said about his own military record. As for Vindman's military rank, Vindman retired at the rank of lieutenant colonel, according to his military records that 7 News obtained. And according to his military records, he reached the rank of colonel, but he did not serve the required time to retire as colonel. But his campaign literature often referred to him as retired U.S. colonel or Army colonel retired. The other thing is, after Vindman announced for Congress, he wrote on X that he fought in combat.
Oh.
But in 2019, a Daily Mail report said that Vindman has not seen combat.
Interesting.
So we've got some questions for him. We hope he comes on and answers these questions.
Well, I appreciate that. Listen, Nick Minock, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. It's Nick Minock. He's with WJLA, ABC 7. He's a reporter there. Hey there, everybody. I am Andrew Langer. This is WMAL. I am here with Patrice Onwuka. So glad I can join you, and you can join me on this Friday. So I'm looking at Twitter, Patrice. I'm looking at Twitter, and Ben Domenech puts up this tweet about it mostly being visuals. You and I have talked about this, and we'd made the comment that this interview took place in an office, but when you look at it a little bit more closely, this is a fascinating picture, isn't it? It was done they did the interview in a cafe, so they're sitting at a cafe table, which is very strange. And anyway, I mean, what jumps out at you? Is it the hot sauce on the table? Is it the coffee mugs? Is it the water on the floor?
It's that so many things in the background are extremely distracting. They have all these other tables with coffee mugs set out. Then you've got her water cup underneath her chair.
Yes.
Which, by the way, if she accidentally pushes her leg back, she will knock the water over. Then that's gonna, that's a distraction within itself. But that's one of the things I've noticed just about the visuals in the room.
It's interesting, right? Because I commented on it, folks, earlier on as we're listening to the cuts. In fact, I don't want to spend the time going back and looking for it. But if you go back and you listen to the early parts of the interview, there are moments in which Kamala Harris is clearly parched. And as I've said, made the joke earlier that Marco Rubio ruined it for everybody because no candidate wants to take a sip of water on the air anymore, for this kind of embarrassment. I'm not sure which is more embarrassing here, but you're right. In the end, it's like, couldn't they have cleared the tables or positioned the cameras a little bit differently? Because it's. I mean, I get it that they did this on the fly, and then the choice that they made to put the table in between them. I mean, Dana Bash has a mug of water in front of her, a mug of something. I shouldn't say water. Maybe it's coffee. Who knows? It's funny, real quick, because I did an interview last week. You talk about not wanting to drink on the air, especially if you're the subject. Yes. And I had a bad moment where I'm in the middle of this interview with German television about the election, and I spilled my water on myself as I'm trying to take a drink. We had to stop the interview and dry me off. It was very embarrassing.
Oh, wow.
But these are the things that happen, the things that we do. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, so I mean, they wanted this really tight shot, so a close up. But it's awkward. Most of these interviews, if you ever see any of the news networks interview President Trump, very often it's in a bigger room. Everything is cleared out. The candidate is facing the interviewer, which is interesting. In this case, Dana Bash is actually facing Tim Walz, and Kamala Harris is kind of askance in between the two of them. And then why did they put Tim Walz on a high chair, a high stool? Because now he is so much taller than his running mate. They should have put him on a regular chair so he's lower down, and then and the same thing for Dana Bash. I mean, maybe Kamala Harris, all her height is in her legs, so when she sits down, she looks like an elementary school student. But that, unfortunately, that's the visual. She looks like she's small. Her posture is not good. She's kind of hunched, and that makes her look even smaller. As I do TV a fair amount,
right?
And what you always want to do is you want to own the box that you're in, that little tight shot from your chest up, or you want to own whatever the seating arrangement is. You want to own the space so that the attention is drawn to you. Frankly, the attention is not drawn to her. It's drawn to her running mate. It's drawn to the host, and she almost fades away. So those are just the visuals. That's my visual assessment.
Something. It's interesting because there are no good choices here as we're watching this. And I know we're trying to paint a word picture here, folks. If you go to my Twitter feed at Andrew_Langer on Twitter, you'll see the picture that we're talking about here. It's a still shot from the interview. And because you don't want to, you would want to, I would think, you're right, put Kamala Harris on the far left of this image.
Yes.
But then you don't want to put Tim Walz in the middle. That would be kind of strange. But maybe, you arrange it because you want to break him up a little bit so he doesn't look so massive. Is he that much bigger than she is? Because I'm looking at this. I can't tell if it's a stool or if it's that he's closer. Sorry, go ahead.
It looks like it's a high chair. I mean, when you see them on stage, they are about the same height. So I think it's just the seating and maybe their natural, torso versus leg ratio. Maybe his torso is taller than hers or something like that. That said, they could have fixed this very easily. Do not have Tim Walz there. Why did he have to be there as her babysitter? You know what I mean?
Wait a minute. That is the brilliant point, and that's why you are so wonderful to work with here, because you listen, this was a 40-minute interview of which they used 18 minutes of it. Tim Walz added nothing to it.
Exactly.
Right? And now I will go back and say he did not actually act as her he did not act as her attack dog. I mean, he did, but I don't think, I think he detracted from it very, very much here. But that's exactly right. It's a situation where she should have just done it on her own, sat where she is, and gone down here. This is a poor choice. And yes, you're right. This I'm looking at this water cup, Patrice. Looking at this water cup underneath, and it's not just that she could knock it over, but it reminds me of the Starbucks coffee cup being in that scene in the Game of Thrones. Clearly somebody missed this here. Listen, we got so much more to go to. It's 7:53 here on O'Connor and Company, WMAL.